Welcome to the Motivate Podcast with Clint Armitage. We are trying to provide Christian motivation one show at a time, and the next one starts right now. What's up, everyone? It's Clint Armitage, and I'm back again with another episode of the Message Motivate Podcast. And this episode is entitled Mission Focused. And as Christians, we really got to start getting more mission focused. So today's podcast, we're going to talk about something in the New Testament, something in the Old Testament, and then also we're going to talk about probably one of the greatest evangelists of the 20th century, 21st century. And we're going to see why we should get mission focused and why God needs us to be mission focused. All right. So let's jump right in. Now, we can't continually get distracted from our mission, the mission that God has put us on, right? Because God trusts that once He's given us the plans for the mission, we need to fulfill our duty and carry them out without delay. And there's a mission in the New Testament here. It's in Luke chapter 10. And that is where Jesus is sending out his 72 disciples. Now that's in some manuscripts. Some other manuscripts say 70 disciples. But either way, he's sending out his disciples, sending them out 2 by 2 to every town and every place that he is about to go. So before he sends them out, Jesus gives them specific instructions on how to carry out the mission. And it's pretty clear that he's telling them to be mission focused. See, in verse 4, this is what Jesus says to them. He says, "Do not take a purse or bag or sandals, and do not greet anyone on the road." So he says this to them after he gives them the mission. This is what he says. So basically, he's telling the disciples that they already have what they need to accomplish their mission. They don't need anything extra. So they don't need to take any extra things on the trip because they have everything that they need. And he's also telling them not to get sidetracked by people on the way, because God knows that extra stuff and other people can really become big distractions in our life and relationship with Him, right? Material things and then relationships, human relationships can really distract us from what God has for us and His mission. And also, this mission that He was sending the disciples on was a time-sensitive mission. It was too important to be distracted by things and even everyday life, like everyday cordiality. Because back in those days, it was kind of customary for people to stop and converse when they met each other on the road as they were traveling. Because obviously they didn't have cars, so they weren't whizzing by people. They were either walking or they had their very slow animals that they had. So they stopped and they conversed as they were traveling. So Jesus was telling them, don't even stop. Just keep on going. So that's because the mission was too important and time sensitive to take away from it. And that's because Jesus knew He didn't have long before He was going to be crucified. And He was sending the disciples ahead of Him to places that He was about to go, and He was about to preach and evangelize and do the things that He was supposed to do. But He needed the prep. And those prep guys were His disciples. He sent them out and He said, don't mess around, get the job done. Okay, so when God puts us in important missions, we need to remember not to veer off the road, and nothing should take away that focus. And this isn't anything new. There are multiple times in our lives that we kind of fail at this, right? But that's okay. You know, we just got to do our best, and we got to do better next time. And there's times in the Old Testament that the Lord tells His people to be mission focused. In Deuteronomy 5:32, it says this. It says, "So be careful to do as the Lord your God has commanded you, so you are not to turn aside to the right or to the left." Now, what is he saying? He's saying in that verse, God is commanding the Israelites to pay strict and close attention to His word. Now, there are times when we need to stay on track, because otherwise we're going to have consequences for our behavior if we don't stay on track, right? If we don't follow exactly what the Lord is telling us to do, there are consequences. And then there are other times where if we lose our focus, we actually lose out on opportunities and victories that God has already set for us. So the path is a straight line and we're supposed to stay on it, but we don't. We veer off and then we lose out on some opportunities. And I get frustrated sometimes when I look back on the things that I screwed up on and didn't follow God's exact path, and I veered off, and next thing you know, I look back and go, dang it, I didn't know that was coming. Well, because God knew, and that's why He was setting us up for that, but I did not listen and I went off the path, and obviously I lost out on that opportunity. So it's frustrating, but we just got to move past that and move on and do better next time. And so we really need to focus when God is sending us out on a mission. And so there's a guy by the name of Billy Graham who's considered one of the greatest evangelists of the 21st century, right? And he's well known. You probably have heard his name. And that guy, man, that guy was mission focused. When God called him, he focused on his mission to evangelize and preach around the world. And he was, instrumental in helping to convert millions. I think there was a couple million people or something like that, that he was a part of their conversion, and God really touched them through him. So he stayed mission focused on that calling that he was given by God. And so I went online and I checked out on crosswalk.com. They had a couple quotes from people who they gathered quotes about Billy Graham and what Billy Graham, kind of did that really told them that he was mission focused. So here's a couple of quotes. And the first one's from Pastor Rick Warren. He's a pastor of, I believe, Saddleback Church. And then also he wrote The Purpose Driven Life. But this is what Rick Warren says. Quote, "I learned from Graham to never lose your single focus. His focus was always on bringing people to Christ. I remember when Graham received the Congressional Gold Medal in the Rotunda in the U.S. Capitol. There were about 400 chairs packed with VIPs, President Clinton, and the leaders of the House and Senate. And they addressed the crowd, honoring Graham's life and achievements. What do you think Graham did when it's time for him to speak? He spent maybe 3 minutes on acknowledging the honor and how little he deserved it. Then he said, 'Let me tell you about Jesus.' Even through the entire event that was about him, he turned the meeting toward his lifetime central focus, Jesus. If that's not mission focused, I don't know what is, right? Because everything's focused on him. He's got all these accolades that are coming to him, being praised by all these, high level leaders of the country and everything. And what does he do? He says, I don't deserve it. Let me tell you about who does. And he talked about Jesus. That's mission focused. Okay, second quote from a guy by the name of Chuck Colson. He's the founder of Prison Fellowship. And so he was a good friend of Billy Graham. And so here's his quote. He said, "I have many rich memories of my experiences with Billy Graham, but none more meaningful than the day he and I toured the Memphis Federal Prison. He had spoken outside to 1,000 inmates gathered from 3 separate institutions. After it was over, I asked Billy if he would go into the maximum security segregation unit to see those men who could not come out to hear him speak. Though his aides were pulling him back to the hotel to rest up for a crusade that night in Memphis, Billy instantly agreed. We toured the cold, stark cell block, and I watched Billy Graham, clearly the greatest evangelist of the 20th century, as he sat on the floor, talking through the grate in a cell door to lead an inmate to Christ. There was no press present, no crowds to impress. This was the real Graham, caring for the least of these and not willing to leave that prison until even the outcasts of that institution had heard the gospel." Unquote. Man, Billy Graham was mission focused. So my question to you is, what's the mission that God has given you? And are you staying mission focused? Or are you getting distracted by things that may be urgent but not important? We really need to hear God's voice and stay on that path. Remember, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. But once we start veering off the road, it either causes problems, we get caught in calamities, consequences, more obstacles, all these distractions, and then it takes us longer to get to where we're supposed to go because we didn't stay mission focused. So Christian, I encourage you, stay mission focused and listen to God. All right, thanks for listening. That was our podcast. And again, it's the Message Motivate podcast with Clint Armitage. If you want to support the podcast, go to our website and click on our store and purchase some merchandise. We got some, cool stuff there, t-shirts, hats, and all those different things. But if you purchase that, it actually supports the podcast and you get something out of it with a cool motivating t-shirt. And it helps the podcast continue to grow and keep going and touch other Christians out there because we want to get to everybody. We want to motivate the world for Christ. And that's our mission, and we want to stay focused on it. So anyways, thanks for listening. And if you want to get in touch, you can email us at info@clintarmitage.com. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Motivate Podcast with Clint Armitage. If you want to get in touch, email us at info@clintarmitage.com.